Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. The subject of the discourse today is based on what is called Arakkhita Sutta, Lord Buddha's discourse on how to be protected. Rakkhita means protected. It is derived from the word rakha or raksha, protection, and therefore directly linked with the word sarana, refuge, protection. Now in this Arakkhita Sutta, there is a negative aspect of rakhana, that is protection. This sutta is one of the most practical suttas that we have in the entire Tipitaka, in the entire Buddhist canon, Pali canon. Now, the historical background of the sutta is like this. They say the great devotee, or lay devotee of the Buddha, known as Anatha Pindika, the feeder of the destitutes. Anatha, destitutes. Pindika means the feeder. One of the most generous and munificent givers of in the time of the Buddha who ever lived. So Anatha Pindika used to wait upon the Buddha every day, morning and evening. And the Sangha, he would visit the monastery that he built, Jetavana, a very great monastery indeed. He spent a whole fortune, unthinkable amount of money, 54,000 golden coins, that is in his time, that is what he spent on building that monastery, out of sheer devotion, out of sheer love for the Buddha, and out of sheer, the deeper understanding of the teachings of the Buddha. He was a Sotapanna himself, a person who has entered into the stream leading directly to Nibbana. So, Anatha Pindika one day went to Bhagavan Buddha, bowed down at his feet and said, Lord, I come here to pay reverence. May the Lord deign to teach me. So the Buddha was already, that very morning, the Buddha slept only for 2 hours a day, between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. Or rather, 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. And then from 4 to 6 he plunged into Samadhi, and he would arise from the Samadhi of Mahakaruna, all-embracing compassion, in order to find out and see in his mental screen. He will sort of see who is the person who he could help on this day. And Anatha Pindika's image appeared in his mental screen, and then he knew exactly what is going to happen into the future. This happened early in the morning, and now it is going to occur in the evening. So, Buddha he had already known. Now, Anatha Pindika, though a very, very affluent and wealthy person, a great industrialist who owned ships that voyaged in foreign countries, and a very, very wealthy person of India of that time. But he was not freed from worry. His worry was that his son was just the opposite of what he was. A very materialistic fellow who just enjoyed, who believed in enjoyment in life and acquiring more and more in order to enjoy more and more, and so on. An hardcore materialist. So he was worried about him, and he had asked the Buddha, how to bring him round on the right path. He is a deviant. He has deviated from the path of righteousness. So Buddha had told him, this happened before, and this young man was coaxed by the father. He said, look, I will give you 1,000 gold coin if you go and attend the Uposatha, the retreat day program. And he did that and so on. So he brought him round and he was very happy. But then, you see, being a very wealthy person and you see, he had other concerns about the future of his enterprises, various enterprises. So, and naturally when he thinks about future, he thinks about death. Sotapannas don't worry about death because they have gone beyond that. They don't have a sense of I-ness and my-ness. I own, I possess, no. But the well-being of the institution that he ran and he developed is there. So Buddha wanted that not only his present life should be very meaningful and productive in the best sense of the term, spiritually productive, but his future too should be assured and well secured. So he had thought of a theme. He said, well, Gahapati, when he bowed down, he said, Gahapati, the house father, which means a householder, you see, head of the family. He said, Chitte Arakkhite, when the mind is unguarded, Arakkhite, what happens? There the Bhagavan said, once the mind is unguarded, or when the mind is unguarded, all the bodily activities that flow from the mind, arise from the mind, also become unguarded. The speech or verbal actions that you undertake or you commit, all that becomes unguarded. And all that mental activities in the form of thinking, imagining, planning, all kinds of mental activities, all those also become unguarded. And when the three modes of activities, actions, karma, are unguarded, then mind also gets further degenerated. And from that, actions to follow again. An unguarded, a person of whose actions are unguarded in the threefold way, then his actions degenerate. They become soiled. They become defiled. And he used a term, avasuta, which simply means saturated with defilement. Saturated means when the mind gets, all the activities are soaked, you see, and becomes wet and soaked and saturated by defilements, by greed, by hatred, by jealousy, by egotism, by delusions of all kind. So when the activities of day-to-day life are soaked in defilement and are saturated by defilement, the mind becomes corroded. The mind becomes putikang. Literally it means rotten. The mind rots. It's like a piece of iron. When you throw it in water and it grows, you see, they rust. It rusts all the time. This rusted iron, ultimately, the rust itself eats into the iron and brings about the destruction of iron. So when the activities rot, are corroded, then the mind further degenerates and it becomes deteriorated more and more. And a human being, you see, and a human being with that kind of rotten conduct, rotten actions, can become a monster. Mao Zedong was asked, well, what would you like to have to fulfill your desire? He said, I would like the whole world to become Maoist type of communist. Deeply believing in violence, in the efficacy of violence. He says, then this man who asked, he said, you want to make the whole world communist? Well, yes. But not only communist, my type of communist, he said. So he was another religious fanatic type of person. Now, and he said, well, if you want to have that kind of communism, you will have to kill half the world. He said, yes, I will do. Nothing wrong about it. To establish the right type of ideology and a government and a society based upon that kind of, violent ideology. Yes, it doesn't matter. Half the mankind can be finished. Now this is a monster mind, a most demoniacal mind created by an intelligent man whose mind has become rotten by hatred, by intolerance, by a kind of deviant thinking. The dosa, at the root of the mind, at the root of rottenness of mind or the rottenness of activities, there are these three roots. Lobha, dosa, moha. Greed, craving, acquisitiveness, grabbing, wanting, all the time. Or if you don't get, if your craving is not satisfied, hating, or delusion, that creates both hate and greed. So these are the factors that bring about, that make a man unguarded all the time. So the best way to guard the mind is by cultivating mindfulness. If you cultivate mindfulness all the time, that means you become mindful of what you are thinking, mindful of what you are doing, mindful of what you are speaking. So to be guarded mentally, to guard the mind, to make the mind guarded, simply means you infuse this element of mindfulness into the mind. If you are aware, if you are mindful, from moment to moment, what is happening inside you, then whatever mental activity that is generated by the mind, all that also will become wholesome. Mindfulness does one thing. It not only guards the mind, it protects the mind. And when the mind is protected, it is secured from greed, hatred and delusion. The mind cannot be overwhelmed anymore by greed, by craving, by dissatisfaction, by egotism, by any kind of unwholesome activity or karma. In the last analysis, it is our conduct, it is our action that determines our destiny. What we are going to be in the future, what kind of happiness, what kind of misery, what kind of success, what kind of failure. All these things are entirely based upon how we conduct ourselves, how we act. Our volitional activity, that is karma. Karma, as understood by the ordinary people, as a kind of fatalistic involvement, that is not what is karma in Buddhism. Buddhism, karma simply means volitional, intentional action. And that determines our future, not only future but life here and now. If we can become alive and alert of whatever we are thinking, and this is possible when we are mindful, mentally mindful, when the mind is guarded by mindfulness. It is then that you have a handle on all your activities which flow from the mind. All actions are preceded by mind. The very first gatha in the Dhammapada, Bhagavan Buddha said, Mano pubbangama dhamma, mano settha mano maya, manasache paduttena, bhasati va karoti va, tato nang dukkha manveti, chakkang va vahato padam. Mano pubbangama, mind precedes, purvagami. Just as a railway train, the engine is the purvagami. It precedes and it pulls the entire train and takes the train anywhere. Similarly, the mind, the consciousness, that part of your existence which is conscious, which is sentient, which knows, that is called consciousness or mind. Vijnana, it is called the Vijnana Khanda, the aggregate of consciousness, knowing. You are conscious because I am sentient, therefore you think, therefore you speak, therefore you act. So consciousness or mind is a very complex world by itself. Now when we train this mind, now mind is immaterial. It's not matter which you can grab and you can control and you do whatever you like. Mind is immaterial, incorporeal, subtle. Now to train this subtle, incorporeal phenomena, that is the very heart of your existence. Now this mind can be trained, you can only by cultivating mindfulness. Therefore the word mindfulness. To be mindful is to be attentive. To be attentive simply means to be fully focused. When you train your mind in such a way that you are fully focused on whatever you think, whatever you say, whatever you do. Now if your mind is fully focused, fully, one-pointed, from moment to moment, it is impossible that you can do anything unwholesome. It is impossible that you can do any akusala karma, evil deed. It just cannot happen. So this focusing on the mind from moment to moment on whatever you say, do or think, is all that is mindfulness. So once we cultivate this mindfulness, there are various ways of cultivating it. I have been thinking in this, discussing in this series on what is called Vedananupassana, contemplation or being mindful of whatever we feel. Vedana is a component of the mind. It's a constituent of the mind. One of the 52 constituents of the mind, consciousness, is Vedana. And it is so very important, so very, significant. It is called Vedana Khanda. It's a whole complex of Vedanas, of feelings that determine our life, our destiny in a profound way indeed. So in this series we have been dealing with how to contemplate on this feeling factor. This factor called feeling, mental factor called feeling, which is responsible for most of how we think, how we speak, how we do, we act. All our activities are really determined by this feeling, the emotional aspect of our life. And it is so very important that we have a handle on it. We have some measure of control over it. This can happen when you are mindful of your feeling. There are three basic feelings which I have already dealt, and all of you, those who have been attending to this series of Satipatthana meditation, you are aware of it. There are these three basic feelings, very basic indeed. These feelings are occurring from moment to moment. From the time you arise, wake up, till you retire, you are feeling every moment, every second, in some way or other. These three fundamental feelings are the feeling of, let's say, Sukha Vedana, a pleasant feeling, a pleasant sensation, a sensation that is very pleasant. And you take pleasure in that pleasant feeling. And its opposite is painful feeling, or something unpleasant, you don't take pleasure in it. It's an unpleasant one, you want to get rid of it.